We all think we know the story of Noah, right? The big boat, all the animals, the giant flood. But what if the story we've been told our whole lives has been missing the real point? Today, we are going to dive deep into this ancient narrative to pull out some really surprising lessons about success, about failure, and about why even the best ideas sometimes just don't stick. Okay, let's just start with one single number, 950. Just let that sink in for a second. That's how many years Noah reportedly dedicated to his call, to his mission. Can you even imagine working on one single project, pushing one single message for nearly 1,000 years? I mean, the level of commitment, of pure grit, is almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around. And after all that time, after 950 years of effort, what was the result? A handful of people listened. That's it. Everyone else, they just completely rejected him. And that brings us to this really provocative, kind of uncomfortable question. After almost a millennium of work with so few results, was Noah actually a failure? Or is our whole definition of success maybe the thing that's flawed? To even begin to answer that, we have to look at this whole story from a completely different angle. Because here's the thing, this isn't really a story about a flood. The dramatic images that we all know, the rain, the rising waters, they've kind of distracted us from what's really going on under the surface. Just look at this contrast here. On one side, you have what we all picture, the spectacle of it all, the ark, the water, the drowning. But the story itself, the text, it focuses on the struggle. It's about the call, the insane amount of time that passes, and the unbelievable patience that Noah had to have. The big, flashy stuff isn't the point. The human element is. And here is the absolute crucial piece of the puzzle. Noah is the only prophet whose timeline is spelled out so clearly. We're told he preached for 950 years. Now, that's not just some random fun fact. It's a huge clue. The story is basically screaming at us, hey, before you jump to conclusions and judge the results, you have to understand the sheer scale of the effort involved here. So, all right, if the problem wasn't a lack of effort or a lack of time, what was the real obstacle? Well, it turns out Noah wasn't just dealing with people who didn't know any better. No, he was up against something way more powerful, an entire social system that was built from the ground up to resist his message. The powerful people of his day, the elite, they actually spelled out their objections pretty clearly. First, there was class arrogance. They literally looked at his followers and said, "We only see the poorest, the lowliest people following you." They couldn't stomach an idea that put them on the same level as everybody else. Second was this blind worship of heritage. They just kept saying, this is how our ancestors did it, so this is how we're going to do it. No questions asked. And finally, and this is the big one, fear of losing privileges. The ruling class knew that real change would threaten their power, their status, and they were not about to let that happen. And this leads us to a really harsh but vital lesson. What Noah's story shows us is that you can have the best message in the world, you can have more patience than anyone in history, and you can still fail to get through to people. And why is that? Because change isn't just about having a good idea. It needs fertile ground. It requires a society that's at least a little bit ready to listen, a society that's willing to look in the mirror. And the hard truth is, not every culture is ready for that. But the resistance he faced wasn't just out there in society. The story then takes this incredibly sharp turn and becomes much more intimate, much more painful. It shifts the focus from the crowds to Noah's own dinner table, his own family. And this is where you feel the real weight of his struggle. I mean, just try to imagine the heartbreak. After centuries of dedication, of being mocked by the world, the most devastating rejection comes from his own son, who flat out refuses to get on the ark. This isn't just another detail. It is, arguably, the most tragic and painful moment in the entire story. And that one single painful moment illustrates a profound truth about life. This family tragedy teaches Noah, and it teaches us, that things like goodness, faith, wisdom, they're not hereditary. You can be the best person on the planet, but you can't just pass that down to your kids like an inheritance. In the end, guidance is a personal choice. Everyone has to make it for themselves. Okay, so we've got societal failure, we've got personal failure. Where in the world is the success story here? Well, this is where we have to completely redefine the symbols of the story. The flood and the ark, they mean something so much deeper than what we see on the surface. So, the flood? Let's stop thinking of it as an act of revenge. It's more like a consequence, It's the natural, inevitable end of an era. When a society systematically shuts down every single opportunity for reform, when it closes all the doors to truth, a new history has to begin. The flood is simply the reset button. And the ark? The ark was never, ever just about the wood and nails. It was a vessel for something way more precious. First, it was an idea, a principle of justice and faith in a world that had totally forgotten them. Second, it was a community, that small group of people who chose to protect that idea against all odds. And finally, it was an alternative model, a blueprint for a new kind of society, ready to set sail once the old world was gone. So here it is, the ultimate takeaway. Noah's true success had nothing to do with his conversion rate. It wasn't about convincing the powerful or building a huge following. His success was in preserving the core idea, the very essence of what it means to be a just and decent human being, so that it could survive and carry on. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? This whole story forces us to look at how we measure success in our own lives, in our work, in our communities, in our efforts to make things better. Are we just chasing the numbers? Are we looking for applause and mass approval? Or are we focused on the sincerity of the effort, on preserving what truly matters, even if only a few people are listening?